It's your girl Chef Kyra, and welcome back to another episode of New York Eats. Welcome to my food channel where we talk about everything nice, sugar and spice, baby. So for today's episode, this episode will be a continuation for the oxtail video. So just to start off, I want to say thank you once again to everyone that showed up for class. Thank you for everyone who signed up and showed up in attendance. I know it's been a minute, and I know you guys have been waiting for this coconut rice and peas video. I'm sorry for the delay. Between being a full-time manager at the store that I work at and just life in general, it's been a lot. So I apologize once again for the delay. But for this episode, we are going to be making the coconut rice and peas that I had put alongside the oxtail for class, and everybody loved how the rice tasted. So I just want to share that recipe with you guys today. The inspiration for this recipe is from a chef by the name of Chef Ricardo on YouTube. I really like his recipe, and it's going to be very similar to his recipe. There are some slight changes and variations. But with all that being said, let's go and let's get cooking. Alright y'all, so here's our ingredients that we're gonna need for this recipe. Once again, as you guys know, I always love to set out the ingredients so you guys have an eye for what you're looking for when you go shopping to make this recipe. Alright y'all, so first things first, we're gonna get our scallions together. Now, we're not gonna use the whole bunch. You wanna use about half. So about this much is going to be good enough for what we're going to be making today. Of course, you use more when you have to double the recipe. So it's about 4 sprigs of thyme. 4 sprigs of scallions. And we are just going to line these bad boys up. Now I am a righty, so it's gonna be hard for me to kind of like cut and show you guys. But typically when I do cut my scallions, I like to cut just the tips off, and I'll toss those little bits to the side. And then we're just gonna come in, hold these together, and come down and slice. Now I'm just going to turn back the normal way so I can cut faster and get through it. Slide that over just so that the beautiful cuts don't get messed up. And you want to just cut until you get to the root of the vegetable. So now that we have that cut, we're just going to put this all to the side. And this is about, I want to say about a half a cup of scallions. So that's perfect. Now we want to cut into our yellow onion. You only want to use half of the yellow onion. You don't need a full onion. So we're just going to cut our ends off. You can keep the root end on so that it's easier to cut the onion, but cutting both ends is perfectly fine as well. We'll get rid of our scraps, make sure we don't get that mixed up. And for our onion, like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to cut into slices and then cut this way and make it into small dice, medium dice. So we're just going to make some slices just like this. And then we're going to come across and cut this way. So now that we have that ready, we're going to get our thyme situated. And they've changed up the packaging for this thyme, or for their herbs at least. And I love Nature's Promise. These are my favorite kind of herbs to get, or at least my favorite brand to get. Now that we have our thyme, you want to do about a quarter of your bunch of thyme. And that is all of our fresh aromatics that we're going to be using for this recipe. So now we can get started on cooking our rice. Alright y'all, so now I have a nice big pot. I'm going to add 2 cups of water. And then we're also going to add 2 cups of coconut milk. Alright, so now that we have our 2 cups of water and 2 cups of coconut milk, we're going to add all of our herbs and aromatics to the water. Also going to add our red kidney beans. Now you can go 2 different ways about the kidney beans. You can do canned kidney beans, or you can also do dried kidney beans, where you'll have to rehydrate the beans. And for that process, it's going to take a bit longer. So you want to be careful about your cooking times. Pay attention to your cooking times. So for that, you would want to make sure that your beans are about a quarter ways out to being done, and then that's when you want to add your rice. But the easier way to do it is to just get some red kidney beans, throw your coconut milk in, all your herbs and seasonings in, and then have that all situated and let the beans get flavored that way, and then add your rice in, so that you're not concerned about, oh, my rice is too crunchy, or it's too soft, or it's too mushy. And rice can be a very delicate thing to, you know, make. Okay, so we have some kosher salt here. We're going to do 1 teaspoon of black pepper. 1 tablespoon of onion powder. A couple dashes of Italian herb. And to add some extra spice to our rice, we are also going to add a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Now, if you're not too crazy about spice, you don't have to add this much. Or you don't have to add it at all. So I know it was a little less than a teaspoon, so it's okay. But about that much. So I guess more so of a 1/4 of a teaspoon would be great. Just to add a little extra kick. Now lastly, you want to add your habanero pepper. If you can get your hands on some Scotch bonnet peppers, that would be great, because that's what's traditionally used in Caribbean cooking when it comes to peppers. But habaneros I use as a substitute because that's what's near me and that's what I can get my hands on. So we're just going to plop that in. Now that we have all of our spices added, we're going to mix that. And the last specialty item that I like to add to my rice to add a touch of sweetness, excuse me, I always sneeze, y'all. Whenever I'm cooking and I put seasonings and stuff on food, I sneeze like it's nobody's business. And then we're gonna add 1/2 teaspoon of some white sugar and another 1/2 teaspoon of some white sugar. Now I like to add a little sugar to my coconut rice and peas just because it adds, like, 1, a nice little sweetness to the rice, and then 2, it really brings out the coconut flavor along with the salt, and I just feel like it complements the rice very well. And as a kid, I remember going to my dad's friend's house. His name is Kurt or Kirk, one of the two. But point being is, an old friend of his, and him and his wife are Jamaican, and so when she made the rice, it had a nice little sweetness to it. So that is my little variation, adding some sugar to the rice, and then also adding a little cayenne pepper to boost up the spice and make it as delicious as I like to. So now that we have all of that together, we're just gonna mix it and stir it around and make sure that all of those spices and things get distributed evenly. So now that we've got that mixed up, we're gonna let that cook for about 5 minutes and let that come up to temp. Alright y'all, so now that we have our 2 cups of water and 2 cups of coconut milk, the next step is going to be to add our rice and bring this water up to a boil. But for the last part, you're also going to add an extra cup of coconut milk and an extra cup of rice. But we always want to start out with less and then work our way up to more, because if you add too much liquid to the rice, you're done, it's cooked. And by then the rice has already absorbed all of the liquid and it turns to mush. So to get the perfect rice, we want to start out with less, and then as we go on, you add more liquid to make it to the perfect texture that you like personally. Okay. Alright y'all, so now our mixture has come to a boil. I'm just gonna mix this around just a little bit more. And now we can add our rice. So this is 2 cups of some jasmine rice. I did not rinse the rice. And we're just gonna add that in. Stir that around. And now we're just gonna let our rice cook. So this is gonna take about 20 minutes to cook. You wanna make sure that your liquid and stuff is still coming up to a boil. Now the rule of thumb is at the 10-minute mark, it's always good to get like a rubber heat spatula or either a fork and to turn your rice and turn your pot at the same time. Now this is something that I've learned when I first started in culinary, when I was studying at Co-op Tech in Manhattan, and I was studying under Chef Cerna. So he's like my chef dad. I will forever love that man, because he's definitely pushed me, and amongst many of my other mentors that I've had. So if you'd like to follow that rule of thumb, you can, but definitely keep your eye out on this rice because of all of the starch plus the little bit of sugar that you've added, plus the sugar in the coconut milk, excuse me, can cause for the rice to stick to the bottom. And typically this just happens with party rice because it's just a lot more stuff going on aside from your regular rice. So ever so often, every 5 minutes, you want to make sure you check in on your rice. But then, like I said, at the 10-minute mark, you can turn and fluff your rice and allow it to continue to cook. Now, once you've seen that all of your liquid has basically started to cook away, you want to taste your rice and check for the texture of your rice. And that's when you're going to be able to kind of make this recipe your own as far as the texture of the rice. So you can add more liquid if you like your rice on the softer side, or you can just add just a touch more to make it where it's nice and tender and it still has a good bite to it. So it's up to you. I'm gonna let this go and cook, and then we'll come back and revisit the rice so that you can see when you want to add. Alright y'all, so after allowing your first batch of liquid to cook off, this is about the time when you want to start to taste your rice for texture, flavor, and also this is what it looks like when you want to add more liquid. So we're gonna add that extra cup of coconut milk and water, and then we're gonna allow for the rice to cook even longer alongside with this extra liquid that's been added to get the perfect texture. Now for me personally, how I like my rice is to have it be tender but also still have a nice little bite to it. I really don't care for mushy rice. And I will be honest, there has been times where I have made this rice and I've failed terribly and it's come out mushy, and then I'll have to remake it all over again. But with this recipe, it's going to come out perfect and nice and tender. I'm gonna put the top back on, let this continue to keep cooking, and we're gonna check back in a few minutes. So now all of our liquid has cooked off, and again the rice has this creamy look to it. Now I'm gonna taste it and see if it's the right texture for me. It's just perfect. It has enough bite, but it's still nice and tender. And typically at this point, once I get the rice to the texture that I want, I like to pull the rice off of the heat, put it on a sheet pan, let it cool so that it keeps that texture and that coconut milk coats around the rice. Alright y'all, so I have my rice on a sheet pan. Now to stop the cooking process and to keep your rice nice and tender and right at the temperature, right at the texture that you want to spread your rice out just like this, and then you want to score your rice. And what that does is it allows all of that steam to be released from the rice and allows for the rice to cool down a lot quicker. Alright y'all, so if you're ready to eat your rice, you can definitely eat it straight out the pot. But if you're pre-making it or your oxtail isn't ready just yet, the way you'd like to reheat it is in the oven or in a pot with some extra coconut milk, just to add a little liquid, and reheat it that way, and just a touch, because you don't want to change the texture of the rice. And you can pair that with some beautiful oxtail, cabbage and some sweet plantains. Enjoy.